Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 699 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ailon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our ninth book just came out. It's called From Letters to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So I want you to go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, I remember when I was an undergraduate at SUNY Buffalo and I made the trek to Ithaca, New York to go and visit Cornell to see what the fraternity and sorority system looked like. I couldn't believe my own eyes. It was everything that a Greek system should look like. The big houses, the streets on campus that were named after Greek organizations, and Cornell recognized the value of these organizations. They invested in them heavily. Certainly the alumni did as well. And I believe that's what makes it such a strong campus to this very day. I treasure all of my friendships with my fraternity brothers from Cornell. And yes, I still do talk to them every single day. Speaking of Cornell, we have another graduate with us on the podcast today. Stacy Ross is an author, a speaker, and a mother and an adult with borderline personality disorder. With raw honesty, Stacy tells the story of her 28-year journey parenting a child with mental illness. Stacy's openness about her struggles make her both relatable and believable, with listeners often recounting those personal experiences for the first time. Stacy also shares coping skills and strategies she's learned along the way, leaving audiences feeling empowered, hopeful, and less isolated. Welcome to the show, Stacy.
It's great to be here.
It is fantastic to have you on the show. I know you have such an important message to tell through your parenting experience, but I want to bring it all the way back to Cornell University because I think this is where it was really a formative part of your life. And so I want to think about the reasons why you chose Cornell, certainly a great institution. Nobody would argue with that. And also what ultimately led you to join Sigma Delta Tau.
Well, I listened to your introduction, and to be perfectly honest, my main reason for choosing Cornell was the Greek life. One of my primary ways that I evaluated schools was the Greek system. I wanted to join a sorority, and at the time, had applied to both Duke, which also has a very vibrant Greek life, and Cornell. And frankly, I went up to Cornell. I grew up on Long Island, and I just felt very much at home. And that was it. And I loved every minute of my time there. I met my husband the first day. We became engaged the last. It's one of those stories. It's in the book. And it's where I met many, probably most of my closest friends. And to this day, it's still who I vacation with, who I see, who I'm now starting to go to weddings of their children. And it really gave me so much.
Wow, that's an amazing testimonial, certainly, to Greek life at Cornell. That's fantastic. And recently, I know you returned to speak with your Alpha chapter there on campus about mental health and sisterhood. Talk to your audience. What was it like coming back to Cornell now in a very different role from when you were a student?
Yes. Well, I've had a couple of different roles over the years. When I left Cornell, I was an advisor to Sigma Delta Tau at University of Rochester. My daughter joined SDT, which they call Sig Delt, at Tulane. So I went back as that. And then one of the in-house officers reached out to all the alumni and said they were looking for alumni that were willing to talk to them about careers, about, I'm sure that, for internships and things like that. And I answered, but I wasn't offering an internship. I just wanted to talk to them because I've become a mental health advocate. I know what's going on campuses with that age group. I know the risk factors. I know the problems they go through. And I know what an amazing built-in support system is sitting right there in that house. So we put together, it was a Zoom. So pretty much all the sisters, the girls going through pledging had to come on, and then the seniors came on as well. A couple of them were daughters of people I had graduated with, so that was kind of special. And I really talked about the importance of recognizing what you have right there and using it as a support system and recognizing that it's okay, especially I know at Cornell, it can be a pressure cooker. Our C word was not collaboration in the 80s, it was competition. And I talked a lot about that. I talked about the coping skills and what I learned along the way. What was really important. It wasn't so important that, the people that you really wanted got into your house, because think about what it will do to them if they don't. And how do we cope with those losses? Because those are real losses along the way. And it was a wonderfully interactive conversation. And what I love most is hearing from them all afterwards. Because what I've learned is when I tell my story, that triggers other people's stories. And several of them reached out privately afterwards. So I'd love to do more of those.
That is fantastic. And I can only imagine how great that was when your daughter got initiated into Sig Delta at 2,
Yes.
as she
But
calls it.
yeah,
That's a great moment. And so good for you. And I want to talk about your memoir because I think it is really important for us to talk about. It's called Searching for Slippers, and it is an incredibly personal story that you're sharing here. So, what gave you the courage to tell this story publicly?
well, writing it gave me the courage to talk it. And actually, Cornell, Sigma Delta Tau was involved in that as well. I wrote my memoir really during COVID. I was laid off from a marketing consulting job, and I had been threatening, and I was always a writer in all different parts of my professional life. And I started writing as a way of coping in different methods. Some was journaling, some was stories. And then in COVID, I really just sat down and I wrote for almost a year. And when the world started opening up, I had about 250, 300 pages written. And I had to make a decision. Do I go back to work? Do I make a go of it? Would my kids find this in a drawer one day? And I ended up finding a publisher. And while we had started putting, which was nothing but a series of stories, into what you now see as Searching for Slippers, into real manuscript format, two girls who have a Cornell alumni podcast called Cornell Thank You um, graduated a couple of years behind me and interviewed me. So, as you asked, that was the first time I told my story publicly. But when you write to a page and there's no judgment. And that's the only way I knew to tell it, because that's how I had been writing it for the past year or so. So I told it the same way on their podcast. And the response was, I still think about it, was so overwhelming because people reached out to me out of the woodworks, whether they knew me peripherally or really knew me, but everyone had a similar story, whether it be them or a relative or a child or a spouse. And the one thing that I talk about is the feelings of isolation and loneliness that I felt um, as a parent raising a child with a severe mental illness. And it struck me as people reached out to me as, why do I feel alone? I'm obviously not. And that made me turn towards vowing to tell my story more as a mental health advocate in the hopes that other people tell their stories. And that's how we make real change and reduce stigma.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And, one of the things that I noticed when I was executive director of the fraternity was that the incidents, the frequency of these incidents were gaining steam every single year. Whether it be suicides, whether it be mental health, all of these things, especially when you start thinking about COVID, I mean, things start
Yeah.
going, through the roof. So I guess the question for you is today, students are reporting higher levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, more so than prior generations. So, what concerns you the most about what you're seeing in this age group?
Well, a couple of things. I think that access to care is probably the biggest problem because you finally, we're at a good point, which is what I like to say is we are talking about it. And kids nowadays are more willing than we certainly were to say, this is too much for me, and to claim that there's a problem, because the first part of solving a problem is acknowledging there's a problem. But if they acknowledge a problem and then can't get help, Well, what does that do? I mean, that's like a double whammy. That makes them not want to talk about it again, and it makes them unable to cope or heal. So, you have access to care problem right on campus. And then you have access to care because a lot of college students can't continue, even if they have a therapist at home, because of cross-state lines, they're not allowed to maintain that communication with their therapist. So I think access to care is a huge problem. And then the second big problem is stigma. We still have societal stigma, self-stigma, secondary stigma. They're all out there. And the real way to combat them is to talk about them and to normalize these feelings that they have. But if they don't get the response that they need to heal when they finally voice them, they're going to go right back into themselves.
You're absolutely right with access to care, and also with stigma. In terms of access to care, just go to your college campus and find out from the counseling center what is the wait time in order to see a therapist. Okay, it's a very simple exercise, and I think the answer is going to surprise you.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely an issue that I think about all the time, and certainly the stigma is still there, as it has been for many, many generations. What are some of the early warning signs that a fraternity brother of yours or a sorority sister of yours may be struggling, but they're hiding it really well?
Mhm. Very often, especially at the colleges, you can have a very high functioning depression, for example. And we tend to think that it's when they withdraw or they're sleeping a lot. Those are very common signs, and don't by any means ignore those. If a friend of yours, is a big party and all of a sudden can't seem to get out of bed or go to class or doesn't find joy, isn't laughing along with you, isn't handing in their work. At the same token, it can be the other way. Suddenly, they're on top of everything, and that's all that matters. And they're like on overdrive all the time. So, essentially, what you're looking for is a change, that they're not the person that you've known them to be.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I like that a lot. You talked about how good the writing was for you because you felt like you could write on the page and you weren't being judged. I
Right?
resonate with that a lot. I've gone through a whole bunch of stuff, and so writing has really, really helped me. And I didn't really learn that skill until I was in a master's program. But that is what it is. There's a
Great,
lot of writing
great
that
coping.
comes. Yeah, there's much more writing that comes in the master's program and in the doctorate program than an undergrad. But all of that being said, right? Um, we don't want them to feel judged. I think that's really the key. So if you're worried about a sorority sister, if you're worried about a fraternity brother right now, what is the best way to start that conversation with them without making them feel judged?
Right? That's what I do every day. When I talk, I don't really tell my story because I want to tell my story for me. I tell my story in the hopes of continuing a conversation or starting a conversation. So I find when I tell my story and share something about myself, that enables somebody else to open up. They connect, they find something in my story. And that's what, when people ask who my book is for, I say, really, my people, everyone seems to find a piece of themselves in my story because it's really for anybody that's life hasn't turned out how they planned. So when I talk to somebody that I suspect is having a problem, I find something in my life that is going to resonate with them and make them feel comfortable enough to open up to me.
You talked a little bit about stigma earlier, and I'll be honest with you, as a guy, if I was around the counseling center at SUNY Buffalo as an undergrad, I would be scared to go there, to
Yep.
walk into that building, because I think that other people who know me very well, okay, I was a very visible student on campus, very visible leader of a top fraternity on campus. All of that being said, if I'm hanging around the counseling center, that means that I'm broken. Okay. In the eyes of other students, or at least in my head, that's what I'm
Sure.
thinking, right?
That's your self-stigma.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
What it is.
So how can our fraternity and sorority chapters create cultures where asking for help is actually viewed as a strength instead of a weakness?
Well, I think we need to give our hats off to this younger generation because I think they do a much better job than we did. I think that they do speak about mental illness and they find it very comfortable to say they're going to their therapist. We're not there yet, but I think it's better. I've also seen the growth of men's support groups because what you said is right. No matter how far along the women are, the men in these comfort zones have always been very far behind. It's obviously doesn't go along with the generic term, the stereotype for masculinity, asking for help. So again, it's about normalizing it. And within the system, it's talking about it at chapter meetings. As often as you talk about, well, it's time to get your flu shot, it's, I found a really good therapist, or how is everyone feeling today? I'm not going to suggest we do touchy-feely and everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya at the beginning of chapter meetings. That's just not going to happen. But we make it available. Maybe there's a social committee, there's a pledge committee, maybe there's a wellness committee. And that is what they did in Sigma Delta Tau at Cornell. There's a wellness group, and that's who brought me in, and that sister is in charge of them. So now you have a go-to person, someone that every sister's comfortable with, that may have a resource list or a support group or things like that. And that's slow. It doesn't happen overnight, but those are all really positive things.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome that they have a wellness group. That was
Mhm.
not something that I
Yep.
had.
No.
That was not something we talked about.
No.
So yeah, I mean, I maybe you're right. Maybe I need to look at it as, hey, we're making progress here. Is it
Yeah.
like exactly the way that we want it? No.
No.
But you got to take steps in the right direction
Yeah.
to get to where you're going, right?
Mhm.
That's really interesting. Also, I think about your family too, and what those dynamics are like, because your advocacy actually extends beyond students. It actually extends to people like parents
Yes.
and caregivers.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what do families often misunderstand about supporting somebody that they love who has a mental illness?
Well, I think that it's different. It's not cookie cutter. Mental illness affects every member in the family collectively and differently. And you don't always know. You have to go along and figure it out as you go. So very often people wanted to come in and help, right? And help. And that put a burden on me because I, one, had to find something for them to do. But when I shared what was going on in our household, then I set up this reporting structure where, a week later, they wanted to know how things were going. And I was three crises down the road at that point. I didn't want to talk to it anymore. So I always tell people that you really have to let the person lead and the family lead. And very often your help is just knowing that you're not demanding anything from them. I know people out there were there for me to help. I needed to be comfortable to reach it out, and I need to build that support system that worked for our family. And sometimes it looked this way, and sometimes it looked quite differently. But sometimes help, you have to be very flexible in what help and support can look like on a daily basis for that family.
Yeah, that's very helpful. The other thing that I think about too is now parents are sending their kids off to college.
Yeah.
That includes me, where my kids are heading off to college as well now. And one of the things that I've heard from a lot of parents that I'm close with, especially if their kid has some kind of mental illness, they struggle sending their kids off to some place where they can't immediately interject and help out. So, what advice would you give parents who are sending a student to college and they're worrying about their kids and their mental health?
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, so I always say that's the right way to feel. It's scary. But if you've done your work beforehand, they're going to be okay. They need to know what resources they have. It can't always be you calling you to solve them. So again, we go to, what's on campus for them to go to. Um, what it's not tracking them on their phone and then calling them and saying, why are you in your room at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night? That's only going to make you feel better for a second, but you're basically telling them you don't believe in them. So it's letting them fail, which we all know that theoretically it's one of the hardest things, and giving them enough tools so that when they do fail, they can bounce back. Because did you know resilience is one of the number one key factors to combat mental illness. Being able, because life's going to hand you those things. They're going to have the stressors, they're going to have the failures, they're going to have the disappointments, but it's how they learn to deal with them and cope with them. And those are the skills we build before they go to school.
All right, so let's talk about that a little bit deeper. I think now
Yeah.
that asks the next question is, okay, so what healthy coping strategies do you suggest to encourage these busy college students that they should develop before they reach a crisis point on campus?
Sure. Well, there's the basics, and let me just start this by saying what works for one child isn't going to work. So when I give talks on building a healthy coping toolbox, it's one of the main ones. It was what I spoke to, part of what I spoke to SDT about on campus. I have an acronym. I took the word honesty because I think the basis for all healing and coping is honesty. And I start with H and I go all the way through. Before we get to that, I think it's also important for the basics. Sleeping well, building, exercising. And that is where you have to build your own. Like I find writing very therapeutic. There are people that wouldn't touch it with, a 10-foot pencil, but maybe they run. Maybe, they have. So those are the kinds of things that hopefully you've seen through high school because you've worked on how to get through test time and taking breaks and all those. So you have a lot of those. And then the honesty acronym comes through where H we talked about is honoring what's going on. So, giving air to what's going on in your life, in your household. O is owning the situation, meaning you know what's best. So if your child or you as the student sees something's going on, they can feel empowered to do something about it. N is noticing the details. This is for every parent and caregiver out there. If they're not calling and they always do call, again, notice that change and act on it. Don't you, while you want to let them fail, you also don't want to tiptoe around before we get into a really bad crisis situation. E is educating and empowering themselves. So those students, to help them cope, should know all the resources on campus, to know what they're dealing with, understand what's due of them, all those kinds of things. And that helps empower them. That's a very powerful thing for your mental health and also just being able to deal with everything. S is sharing. Building your network. This is all about building your support system, which they need to do in a new place. And it's one of the most difficult things. And that's something to coach them through. And that can be teachers, an RA, friends. It's not only, the people in their immediate dorm room. T is tell their story. I talk about that really from a caregiver perspective. It's therapeutic and it combats stigma. But for college students, one of the most important things is to remember that why you matter. So they're not going to be able to do anything if they run themselves ragged and forget to take care of themselves. And that goes back to the beginning. And you kind of cherry pick all these different things into your own personal toolbox. And then sometimes that toolbox sits in the closet because you're going through a very easy, good time. And then sometimes you dust it off and you take a few things out and you start running again every morning. You set the alarm clock, making sure you get up at the same time every day, and you see what works. And you don't beat yourself up when something's not working. But the more you, again, talk about building these coping skills, seeing what works for you, it also gives them hope. When things are tough, you can say, well, have you been sleeping okay? Or did you make an appointment with your therapist? And then they have hope that they have a way to solve something.
Yeah, right from the onset, you talked about sleep, and I'll tell you right now, the college students are not getting enough
They're
sleep.
not asleep.
They're not, I'm just, let's
Of course
start
they're not.
there.
And they're not
Start from the
eating
top.
right,
They're not eating right. They're not working out or going to the gym or doing some kind of physical
and the
exercise.
structure is important too. The same time, which we never did. I mean, the middle of the night, you get up, all nighters. I mean, that wasn't a word till I went to college.
Yeah. Yeah, and now they wear it as a badge of honor, but it's not.
It's
It's
not.
really not, you know, like
No.
let's
So
not be proud of that.
that's the transition we'd like is the badge of honor to be being balanced.
Right. That's the badge. Be balanced in life,
Right.
not doing the all-nighter. It's the
Right.
opposite of what we're rewarding.
Right.
Boy, oh boy, this has been really great, and I appreciate you sharing all this. I think this will be tremendously helpful to the college students that listen to this episode. Now, my weakness is really good food. Okay, so and I get the sense that you can appreciate a really
Oh
good
yeah.
meal as well. And you live in New Jersey, where boy, oh boy, I mean, there's so much good food around. I mean, the Italian is absolutely incredible. There's so much good food. I don't even know where to begin. So the next time I'm in your area of Jersey, where should I be going for a great meal these days?
Well, I live at the beach,
Mhm.
so you can either go for a view or go for great food. It's hard to, they're not all the same, but for your best Italian meal down near me is a place called Biravino. We're friends with the owners, and it is unbelievable. View's not so great, but the atmosphere is great. And then if you want to be on the water, I live near Red Bank, New Jersey,
Well,
and we went to a place. We have a place called Boondocks, which is down and dirty lobster rolls, and you watch the sunset over the Navasink River, and that's it. And then you walk over to Lighthouse and get ices, and you've had a great Jersey Shore night.
that's a great night right there. You see that? This is somebody that understands a great Jersey Shore night. You get a
Right.
lobster roll, you get some ices, and honestly,
All the
it's
day.
there's nothing else to talk about. I mean, everything is great in life, you know?
Right.
I appreciate that. That's very authentic and very great coming out of Red Bank. And yeah, I miss eating on the water. It's just something that I miss. Before I moved out to Nashville, Tennessee, I was also on Long Island. We had a
Oh,
house in East Meadow, and so we would go out to Robert Moses and Jones Beach, and there were restaurants that would be on the water there that I tell you it would knock your socks off. Not
oh
just
no, I grew up out there.
yeah, I mean, it's just, you sit there and you eat dinner over the water, and it's like, there's nothing better than that. And I really do miss that. When you're in a landlocked state like Tennessee, you're like, boy, oh boy, what I would give to have a nice seafood meal, a lobster roll, on the water. I mean, you'd give everything.
Right. There's nothing like it.
No, well, good on you that you're able to do that all the time in Red Bank. That's a lot of fun. So, if our listeners, if they want to connect with you for speaking opportunities on their college campus, or maybe they want to buy your book, it's called Searching for Slippers.
Yep.
Where should they go to get all of these things and connect with you?
Well, they can do all of that on my website, which is Stacy Ross Speaks, which is StacyRossSpeaks.com. They can buy my book anywhere books are sold on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anything like that. And I'd love to talk to more students. I can put together a fun talk. It's not my life is, while my memoir talks about a very heavy topic, there's actually a lot of light things. And I talk about a lot about Greek life and my time at college.
That is fantastic. Go to stacyrosspeaks.com. Go and bring her to your campus. Go and buy the book. It's called Searching for Slippers. And listen, I appreciate everything that you're doing. It's wonderful to see alumni that will go out and work with college students today and give back and make it easier for the next generation. So I do appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for all you're doing, Michael.
Of course. And to our listeners, if you learned something today from Stacy, and I know you did because I did, so I'm sure that you did, I want you to share this episode with your entire chapter. So, what I want you to do is go and grab the link to this episode, put it in a group chat with your entire sorority, put it in a group chat with your entire fraternity, share it on social media. You never know who needs to hear Stacy's message today. Thank you so much to our listeners. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.